Alright, so this is just a quick video to go over some of the basic points of chapter 17 and 18 of The Color of Water. So our first chapter, chapter 17, is Lost in Harlem, so this is told in the voice of Ruth. Some of the new characters in this one are Andrew McBride. We've been introduced to him before, but this is the first time that where we actually learn how Ruth and James' father, biological father, actually met. So he worked with Ruth in a factory that her aunt owned, and he went by the name of Dennis. We're also introduced to Aunt Mary's husband, whose name's Uncle Isaac, who is a scary alcoholic who frightens Ruth. We're also briefly introduced to Mr. Stein, who's a man who's having an affair with Aunt Mary and happens to be Aunt Mary's best friend's husband. And then we're also introduced to a Rocky, who is an African American manager of a hi hat barbershop in Harlem, and is also a pimp, meaning that he is someone who runs prostitutes, and he's a central figure. So, of these, Andrew McBride and Rocky are probably the two most important new characters from this chapter. So, the title is Lost in Harlem, and the chapter talks about how attracted Ruth is to Harlem. She's just a young girl, 19 years old, and she really wants to be a part of the scene. But she's a young, naive girl, and she gets lost in Harlem, not really understanding the rules of it. She ends up in a pretty bad situation that she narrowly escapes. So the general plot of this chapter is we learn what happened to Ruth after she's graduated from high school and she's moved to New York. We learn a little bit about her situation and where she's living. This chapter is also important because it introduces us in more detail to James' biological father, Andrew McBride. As the title tells us, Ruth gets lost in Harlem and runs into some trouble as she tries to sort of find her way. And we learn some more intimate details about her, and also about how James' father, Andrew, helped her out in there. So enjoy reading that. Now, chapter 18 is back in the voice of James McBride, and this is called Lost in Delaware. So a couple of the new characters here, there's really only one set that is very important, but David H. and Ann Fox Dawson are a wealthy white couple who are philanthropists who give a lot of money to helping inner city children, and among those that they end up helping is James, and they help him with his with a band scholarship. And in exchange for the money, not a direct exchange, but he worked on their house on the weekends and for events that they had, and he worked in part as a butler. This was not necessarily an easy job for him. One, because he wasn't good at it, but also because it was a bunch of black servants serving white guests, wealthy white guests. So you can understand, that this smacks a little bit of racism or of the past, but it ends up being a very interesting experience for James, and he comes out of it not feeling angry about the situation, but sort of with a renewed, not a renewed, but a new sense of things, because he's being introduced to a world that he's completely unfamiliar with, that it's nothing that he knew of in New York or in Louisville. So it's sort of opening his mind, and he's able to form a close relationship with this couple, particularly the wife. So the title of this one is Lost in Delaware, and as is so often the case with these titles, it's matched up with the previous title, which was Lost in Harlem. So just like Ruth was lost in Harlem, the whole family is a little bit lost in Delaware. They've had to move out of New York to Delaware, which is a very, very different has a very different environment than what they're used to in New York. And so it takes some adjusting to, and there's some bumps along the way as they struggle to sort of find themselves, and James also struggles to find himself. So the general plot of this one is that it starts off talking about the reasons for the move from New York to Delaware, how and why that happened, and what it meant for James and his siblings. So James is still the eldest one at home right now, so he still has his younger siblings who are there as well. We learn more about um, how James transitions from his time in the street to getting back to his education, how he saw this move as something that might be a positive thing for him, and it ends up being a positive thing for him. And At the end of the at the end of the chapter, it ends with him going off to college. So it has been a positive experience for him. Okay, so enjoy reading that. I think there's questions on Blackboard for you, and we'll talk about this more in class. Take care. Bye.